frowning Thereza, to be a beautiful woman. She was also held in high regard in her community. An exemplar member of the local church, Thereza was best known for her pious devotion to her elderly mother, who fell ill shortly after Thereza came of age. Burdened by severe chronic pain and light sensitivity, her mother, a former member of the church's prayer group, was forced to lie in her bed all day. Even talking or eating, as was said, was enough to trigger bursts of pain across her head and body. Thereza would care for her every day and lead the prayer group in the matriarch's absence, always keeping a joyful smile. Thereza said her mother believed faith would heal her, declining visits from doctors, a miracle to be remembered for ages. Moved by the young woman's devotion, the townsfolk soon began to send her financial aid. As they said, merely giving back a bit of what Thereza's family had given to the town. Thereza's mother would only accept visits from the local preacher, who would routinely speak of the old woman's admirable perseverance during his sermons. This went on for many years, and it might have continued until Thereza's mother passing. It did not. On a moonless night, blood-curdling screams cut through the town's sleep. Alarmed by the sudden shattering of the usual peace, the townspeople rushed towards the source of those dreadful sounds. They came from Thereza's house. They were her screams. Fearing a nocturnal intruder, a group of men broke through the door, ready to save the small family from whatever abomination awaited. Nothing could prepare them for the truth. Crawling through the cellar door, Thereza's mother reached for help with an emaciated arm that ended in skeletal fingers. Her other hand stabbed at the dirt ground, holding the blood-covered shard of a glass plate like an alpinist holds an ice pick. Her wide-open mouth could make no sound because, as the townsfolk would soon discover, her tongue had been cut off long ago. Still screaming and holding her bloody face, Thereza ran up the cellar stairs and froze for a moment as she saw the shocked men who had come to her aid. She pointed towards the cellar and shouted that the intruder was still down there. Hearing that, the men ran downstairs to find nothing except for the woven burlap sacks that had served as a mattress for many years, and the bucket. When they came back to aid Thereza's mother, the young woman had already vanished amidst the commotion. She had ran away to the nearby forest. Thereza's mother couldn't speak, and she had never learned to write. Even so, no further explaining was needed after the preacher was found hanging from a tree in his backyard on the following morning. His widow and children had already left the town. The townsfolk took care of Thereza's mother as best as they could during her last days. She always craved company, dreading the idea of being left alone. Sadly, her last days with Thereza seemed to have been particularly rough on her already malnourished and frail body, and she passed away soon after. Apart from the toll of Thereza's actions, no one seemed to notice any sickness. Then, food started to disappear from people's homes during the night. At first, it seemed like locking all doors and windows would prevent it. However, soon enough, people began to wake up after hearing glass breaking. Children who had seen the intruder would tell their parents that a hideous woman had broken into their homes and scared them into staying silent. The men started to stay up late, waiting in their kitchens with broomsticks and machetes. It didn't take more than a couple of beatings for Thereza to stop her nightly break-ins. The men later showed the nail marks on their arms and faces. The witch could put up a fight before fleeing. In her last days, she begged. Her pleas and cries echoed through the streets for weeks, followed by curses and threats at those that had denied her money and food. The townsfolk would rather watch her starve than call the police. Children began throwing stones at her, calling her frowning Thereza to their parents' approval. That seemed to be the only thing that would stop her pleading. Upon hearing the nickname, she would remember the beauty she had lost and hide her face in shame, running away and swearing vengeance on those who knew her by that name. A day went by without any sign of her, and it seemed like she had finally left the city for good. The townspeople woke up on the following morning to find the church vandalized and a child missing. The citizens rushed to the abandoned preacher's house, where they knew she had been spending the night. Thereza sat on a couch, her head up and her eyes open. The infection from the untreated cuts to her face had finally gotten the best out of her. It had made her face look like she had been dead for a long time. One of the deep cuts made it look like she grinned at the people. After all, Thereza had died with a full belly. A new preacher had arrived. He insisted that every citizen should be buried at the graveyard near the church, even her. However, after her burial, the nights in the town were not the same. Horrifying screams echoed from the graveyard after midnight. This went on for countless nights. The entire town knew that she did not belong there, and so did her. In the cover of the night, the same men who had once rushed to her aid jumped over the graveyard wall to put her in her place. They took her corpse from her grave and buried her at the abandoned house's backyard, by the tree. It appears that what had been coming from the graveyard were cries for freedom. There was now silence in the night. However, something else came with it. At first, weird accidents started to happen to children at night. They would fall and break bones, insisting that they had been pushed. The town's parents would notice cuts and bruises on the skin of increasingly quiet children. Upon being asked who had hurt them, they would refuse to answer. A man was crippled after, as he said, something rushed in front of his horse at night, causing it to quickly stand on its rear legs and drop him. When a little girl did not survive a fall from her bedroom window, it was time for the town to act once more. A mob gathered by the tree, ready to dig up her bones once more and burn them to ashes. But after digging 6 feet deep, they found nothing. Distraught at the sight of the empty grave, the mob left, leaving an open sore in the ground. From that day on, safety measures were taken to protect the townspeople. Of course, sometimes a window would be left unlocked, or an emergency would force someone to travel at night. And by the following morning, the city's respect for their new traditions would be reinforced amidst cries and grieving processions. This shadow weighed over the city for generations. However, time marches on. Stories spread and dilute. Traditions become relics. There are many more reasons to lock your doors and windows now. There are no more horses to be startled. Car crashes are one of the most common things in the world. Frowning Thereza is not a name you hear very often in that city anymore. There is one exception, though. It is now a common rite of passage for teenagers to go mock the old witch before descending into her grave. Usually, your friends wait in front of the old witch's house while you go inside. You come back and tell them you did it, showing a bit of dirt on your hands as proof. Who could say you didn't? You had to be alone, after all. Before sunrise on last Ash Wednesday, one of them told their friend to live stream himself doing it. They watched from afar as he walked past the barred front door and climbed through a broken window. He walked past the leather couch, which seemed to have kept her outline after all those years, and through the back door into the backyard. There stood the tree. The shadow from its branches kept the open grave hidden from the moonlight. He took a deep breath and said the words, "Frowning Thereza, you made your mother a mute. You got stoned around and kicked around. Now I break into your grave." After that, the teenager descended into the grave and filmed the tree branches from below. "That's it," he said, before turning around to climb out of the hole. Then, he began to scream. Before the live stream was cut off, the same people who heard him say her name now watched as he began to scream and cry for help. He said the witch had grabbed him before his words turned into unintelligible pleas as he grasped at the ground beyond the grave. Near the end, his voice had changed in pitch to a high shriek that almost sounded like laughter. None of his friends dared to go after him. On the following morning, after many threats and anguished cries from the teenager's parents, his friends finally squealed. They found him in the grave, his skin white as a ghost. A heart attack, from what the necropsy would later conclude. His foot, bent in a weird way, was still stuck to a root. In Anglo-Saxon culture and tradition, witches are seen as women who have acquired magical capabilities after making a pact with an entity. Sometimes they may be crones who know how to make elixirs and potions from the combinations of natural resources and incantations. They may hex people or be sought for their divinations. In South America, things are a bit different. The good witch trope is not that common in Latin folklore. This can be better explained through the region's culture being influenced by medieval Spanish and Portuguese tradition. Fellow seeker Augusto gave us a great lead on that. In Galicia, Spain, the benevolent or morally gray witch is known as La Bruja, while the Magus are something else. Even though the word bruja is used more often, the witches we have researched, the ones who persist in South American campfire stories, are more similar to Las Megas. Even though they can still take human form, they are no longer capable of looking like a normal person. These creatures have long detached from humanity, in body and in spirit. This is the first video in a series that will venture into Obscura to unearth the scariest witch tales from South America. Thank you for venturing into Obscura Scrolls. If you wish to keep updated with our latest findings, don't forget to like and subscribe so YouTube knows you're one of us. If you have intel on Genesis Obscura or anomalies for the Legendarium, let us know in the comments below. Stay vigilant, stay safe.